We are here. I'm DJ Ski from The Realest. This man needs no introduction. I'm talking about Tony Gwynn Jr. What's up, sir? Welcome in.
What's up, Ski? How you doing, brother?
All is good, man. First up, I'm honored to not only be speaking with you, not only have we known each other a few years now, and you're one of the best human beings that I've met in our interactions, but the fact that we now are kind of collaborating through this whole memorabilia auction that we're doing with, obviously, your pops, Tony Gwynn, has just been so, as somebody that grew up watching him and a diehard baseball fan, has been truly a dream come true. And like having these items around me, I mean, you see Silver Slugger awards, you see all of these game used jerseys and balls is insane. What was it like now in retrospect? You might not have appreciated some of these things as a kid. What was
Yeah,
it like growing up with all of these items around you?
I don't think you can appreciate it at a young age. I mean, I've been around that stuff as far back as I have memories. So understanding, the significance of it really doesn't come until you have some perspective of your own to kind of really understand, what you grew up around. And so, since I got a chance to live out my dream in the big leagues, I know how crazy it is for him to have those type of items just kind of stacking up on one another as time went along.
It's true. And your dad was actually a collector. I mean, we've seen through a lot of these things. Like he was collecting not only and keeping incredible records of all his items, but from others, right? Like there's a whole, like some of my favorite things we have are all of these hats from the 98, 99 All-Star games from all the National League players that are not only embroidered with the patches signed by the players, but he actually went out of his way, it looks like, and
Yeah.
got them signed by all of the players there. Talk
Yeah,
about
no,
his kind of love of collecting.
I mean, I just think he was a fan of the game first and foremost, as much as he really took his craft serious and it was all business. He also was a fan of the game. I mean, when he wasn't at the field or wasn't doing his thing in regards to baseball, he was typically watching it. I mean, it was like 24/7. So I just think he was a fan of how those guys got to work. And, those All Star games are the one time at that point. Remember, wild card didn't really come along until after
Yeah.
that strike season. So, prior to that, the really only time you got to see these other great players was at these All Star games, really, and you got a chance to spend time with them. And I think that only enhances that experience of being the fan that you are when you see these guys on TV, you're across the diamond from them, but then you guys are all sharing a locker room at one time, and so you get a chance to meet these guys. And I know my dad, as many times as he got to an All Star game, it never felt old for him.
Amazing. What was your first memory of being around a Major League Baseball clubhouse or environment? Is there anything that like stood out really early on? I know there's so many moments because that was your childhood, but is there one thing that you're like, that was an early memory that stuck out?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, the first time getting to go on like the old school AstroTurf, like in Cincinnati or
Ooh.
Philadelphia, you see that on TV, and you see the ball bouncing off of it,
Oh.
like yeah, you don't normally see. So that was like one of the first things I was like looking forward to as a kid was to get on that turf and to see how it felt. And so I have so many of those memories. I give you one more in the All Star game. I was a little bit older at this point. I think it was '98, so I was probably about 16. And so I had a good grasp of like what I was around, and to listen to the likes of Barry and my dad go back and forth, and then Kirk Schilling and some of those guys start to kind of talk to each other about what made them successful and their matches against one another. It was insane. It was just I knew at that point I was extremely blessed to be in the seat I was in at that point.
You know, one of my favorite pieces of content in sports, not just baseball, that's come out over the past few years, I'm sure you've seen, is Greg Maddux
Oh
talking
yeah.
about his interaction with your dad. And Maddux, the greatest pitcher. Did your dad ever talk to you about how he approached these pitchers, especially ones that had insane records until it came to him, of course. He always was finding them.
In terms of what I think it was like the Maddox, Smoltz, Glavine trio, my dad was when it came to the actual, art of hitting, it was pretty simplified for him. And those guys, what made them good is that they could execute, and because they could execute in the same kind of spots, that was tough for them to do. But whereas my dad who was much more simple. He was kind of letting the pitcher dictate what he was going to do. That kind of played right into his hands. And so I think you heard Maddox say towards the end, he just would throw the ball down the middle because he let my dad try to figure out what it was he was going to do with it. And a lot of times for Maddox, it worked better than him trying to dot a pitch on the outside corner or try to come in where he could get hurt. And so it's,
Wow.
again, it's a reminder of the type of players that were in that era. So many great ones. And my dad had some success against some of them.
It's funny, yeah, we have a couple of the Kurt Schilling hats from the All-Star game that he signed. And now hearing the story behind the story and how much he respected them and how much I guess the respect was mutual must be just so incredible. Everybody, obviously, when they think of Tony Gwynn, they think of one of the great hitters of all time, maybe the greatest of all time. The stats, especially as we've dug in and look at all these items, are insane. Is there one stat that you think stands out the most to you? I mean, it could be 3,000 hits, it could be his average, it could be some obscure one that others don't think on, especially with you not only as a player, but now a broadcaster. If you had to define your father in one stat you were most, I guess not proud, because you're proud of all of them, but if there was one that really stood out that you wanted people to pay attention to, it really defines his greatness. Off the cuff, what is that to you?
I think when it was all said and done, he could go 2 full seasons of at bats and not get a hit and still be a lifetime 300 hitter. That's probably
That's
the one. That's probably the one that comes to mind off the cuff.
that's a great one. And I think you're never going to see that again, right? Like it's
No,
just a different type of I mean, not only his skill set, but baseball has changed and evolved so much. It's insane when you're seeing like batting champs, averages being less than Tony had in his worst season, right? Like
right?
it's
Yeah.
just
I mean, for a longest time, that record held where he had the lowest batting average title. But I just think the mindset is different for a hitter than it was then. Doesn't mean it won't come back. I think you're seeing signs of it starting to
that's
kind
true.
of
That's true.
work its way back towards where we were. But I don't know if we'll ever get back to that kind of hitting. I mean, Luis Ariz is really the only one I could see that's doing it at all
It's
at
funny.
this level.
Dude, that was going to be my next question. I was going to say, which player specifically on the Padres reminds you the most in terms of style as your dad? Is it
Yeah,
Lou?
that's an easy one. That's an easy one.
Yeah,
It's Louise, and there's probably what the kid in Cleveland, probably the only two
Ooh,
guys that
yeah.
really have that style of hitting. So yeah, it's just I think what's great about today's game is, especially in those two guys' cases, that it shows like the younger generation that there are more ways to have success at the big league level than just the power or the slug that we like to have. You can also make a good living and be a really good player. I mean, in Luis's cases, he's won 3 straight batting titles. I mean, the league, the guys in the league respect that a lot more than I think people on the outside do.
I got to watch Lou come up as a Twins fan, right? And he's succeeded everywhere he's gone from Florida to now San Diego. And, what's also intriguing about him is there's so many parallels is he's as good a guy off the field, if not better than he is on the field, which says a lot. And that's one thing that always stood out about your dad. I mean, every photo he's smiling. What kept, and was there any advice your father ever gave you on being positive? Because it seemed like he was always just, excited and happy to be there. And I think, you see a lot of players, especially in sports and especially with how high salaries and things are, it's not always like that. A lot of guys. What kept him, I guess, so humble throughout all these
Yeah.
years?
I mean, his family, I think, was a big part of that. I think um, my mom was a huge part of keeping him grounded. My dad was naturally like that anyway. I think he realized that he was blessed to be able to play a game for a living. I think that's where it started for him. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
any bigger than that. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. As I said, he was very focused on
Yeah.
being the best he could at that game, but he always had that perspective. And I think ultimately, my dad just enjoyed what he was doing. He enjoyed being around people, and so that kind of it wasn't really work to him. And I guess that's probably why you got the best of him. I think most of the time.
It's true. Your mom, what an amazing woman. It's been such a pleasure getting to know her and so incredible. And even her business acumen and how she, served as his archivist, keeping all of these balls, creating all these really cool products, putting beautiful display cases. I mean, she's an artist in her own right. But one thing that I was shocked to find, and she told me a little bit about, and would love to see if you have any memories, is we found these old VHS camcorders and tons of tape, just tape of him hitting. And she's like, oh yeah, he'd be in a slump. I tell him what he's doing wrong and watch him do those things. So it sounds like she was kind of the secret weapon to kind of his success in finding that. What were the memories of your mom and how amazing she is in helping your dad get through those moments and become, obviously rise to the superstardom level that he was, and also keep him humble?
Yeah, no, I think initially they bought that Beta 8 tape to just film me, uh, but then my dad kind of went into a little bit of a rut, and he just kind of one day was like, "Leash, would you mind taping my at bats?" And I think through that, because at that time there wasn't like you couldn't go down to the stadium and work on your
Mhm.
swing like it was in the '80s, so it was a little bit different. Then so my mom would have to they go to a park and she would have to be the one throwing them BP, and so she got to know his swing over that time, and she knew it probably better than anybody else did. He ended up coming out of that slump, and then from that point, never really looked back. And so she certainly had a big part, especially in the early years, of kind of getting him right and being a home hitting coach, if you will.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm going to grab this trophy one second. Hold
Yeah.
on. The fact that we have, okay, so behind us, obviously, like Silver Slugger Awards, Gold Glove Awards, all these things that people are familiar with, incredible trophies. Like, that's a no brainer. We don't even need to talk about it. What I was so impressed to see was stuff like this. 1976, right? What is this? Long
Long Beach
Beach
Poly.
Poly captain,
Yeah.
Tony Gwynn. And like again, like as a trophy, rather unspectacular, especially compared to this. But the fact that this is so early on one of his trophies, and I think how long were your parents together? When did they
They've been
meet?
together since high school, so they've been together around that time. So
So the fact that you still have this is just insane, and it's so rare to get a piece like that, right? So like this is some of my favorite stuff, just looking up because of the history and the legacy and the stories behind it. And that's really what memorabilia is, right? It's not just the item itself, which looks cool. It's the story you can tell behind it.
without a
What's so
doubt.
crazy about going to speaking of Long Beach, I didn't realize your dad was equally as good a basketball player in some regards as he was a baseball player, which is just insane to think the level that he was. He was
Yeah.
actually drafted to the pros. Did you guys ever have any friendly, games
Oh
of
yeah.
hoops? And what was he like? What was he like on the court?
Oh yeah, no, there was a lot of. I don't know if they were always friendly, but there was certainly a lot of hooping going. I mean, that was my dad's first love, and so that was passed along to me. And I set along the path until baseball was the path that really presented itself. But he loved to hoop. I mean, it took me till I was probably about 16 before I was able to
Wow.
beat him. He was a little bigger than me, and once his knees stopped, being fresh, I had the clear advantage at that point. So, but yeah, it was a very competitive household, especially when it came to basketball. My dad, in terms of me, was really hands off in terms of baseball, but the one sport that used to get under his skin if I didn't go out and play well was basketball.
That's amazing. Who are his favorite players? Because we have some signed basketball memorabilia we found that he's collected over the years. Who did he
His
really like to watch?
his guy was Magic Johnson. I think that was it was by far his favorite player to watch. Him and Magic knew each other a little bit, and so um, because I think because of that, I was a Laker fan as a young kid growing up, and but that was his favorite. Obviously, he had an affinity for Michael Jordan too. That was another big guy that I think the world at this point is is a big fan of. But
Yeah.
I heard him talk about Magic more than I heard him talk about anybody else.
Really, that's amazing. It's funny because we have one of the items we found was a Magic Johnson and Larry Bird signed basketball with the Barcelona '92. That's the Dream Team
Yeah,
inscription, which is just an insane piece of history. And now knowing the connection between it just makes it that much cooler, right?
yeah.
That's what I think is so cool about so many of these items. To move on, I mean, we have so many jerseys. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details because it's so obvious. We have the jersey that he wore in his final hit. we have this 99 All-Star Game jersey. I mean, you see him with Ted Williams, like just that moment. And by the way, his face, he looks so happy to be around Ted then. What
That
was their
was it.
relationship like?
It was it kind of took off. I think in 1992, they did a
Wow.
sit down with Bob Costas, and there's video of it, and you can see in that moment that my dad had a. It was almost like the teacher sitting next to the student, and the teacher calling on the student, and the student not wanting to get the answer wrong, and so kind of is like a little hesitant. And so when you watch that video, that's the kind of admiration I think my dad had for Ted. And then I think Ted kind of gave him some good advice from that year on. My dad probably had his most homers, driven in the most runs since at that point, just off of the kind of advice that Ted gave him.
So crazy. When we talk about other legends, I was shocked to see a couple of these items, right? Like one of my favorite pieces is this Sports Illustrated cover from July 27th, 1970, celebrating Willie Mays' 3,000th hit. And it's signed to Tony in honor of the 3,000th hit, Willie Mays. So I'm assuming this is a gift given from Willie to Tony when he got that hit. Like, especially like Willie, I would say it's funny. I think there was such a unique comparison between Willie and your father, given the fact that Willie was almost every player's favorite player. The same way I think your dad was almost every player's favorite player. Speak on their relationship a little bit. Would love to hear, any insights that you have.
I mean, you get into that 3,000 hit club. You're in the right company in terms of being able to get gifts like that from one of the greatest to ever run on a baseball field. And I didn't get to see my dad. I didn't get to be around my dad when him and Willie would have conversations. But it was that was one of the first guys that my dad ever really taught me about. One of the, I think, cornerstones to baseball is passed down to each generation, and so it's incumbent upon the generation that's at hand to teach the younger generation about the history of the game. And so learning about Willie Mays growing up, it was pretty clear my dad was paying close attention to his career. And then you start to elevate yourself in the game, especially as a black baseball player. I think there's no doubt that when you start to elevate into that class where a Willie Mays starts to take notice, you try to grab onto to those relationships as much as you can, and try to learn as much from those type of guys that you can. I think my dad was no different.
And you hit an interesting point, and that's one thing that's so important in what we are really trying to do with these items, right? Like the reason that we're doing this whole event is to continue the legacy, right? Like
Right.
it's now been 10 years, which is insane since your father passed away, and there's a whole group of kids now that didn't get a chance to see him like I did, obviously, like
Right.
you did, play. But these stories, the history, especially in a sport that is kind of reliant on the past, is baseball, is one thing we really want to do. And one thing that I think is so cool in terms of these items is that it gets to kind of reinvigorate and remind people of how great, Tony
Yeah.
and others were from doing that. And that's why we're so honored to be doing this. One item that I think really speaks to that stands out is this plaque of balls. This was 3,000 hit club. Obviously, a lot of players weren't available. Like you're not getting a Babe Ruth, or people that have passed away.
Right.
Um, but what's so interesting is not only does this have all of these incredible players. I mean, we're looking at George Brett, Dave Winfield, Eddie Murray, Rod Carew, Carl Yastrzemski, Paul Molitor, Wade Boggs, you name it, Hank Aaron. There's three of these balls that are unscripted, and from three people who have passed away, two really recently. First one, though, Stan Musial. That was my father's favorite player and who I learned. And he wrote, Tony, a great hitter, Stan
Yeah.
Musial. Like, it's just the respect your father had. I mean, it probably was tough to appreciate at the time, but looking back, you just must be so proud. And it's so crazy to have his name be up amongst these greats. When we see Willie Mays, again, writing to something personalized. Even recently, Pete Rose, despite the controversy around Pete, most hits of all time, for him to go out of his way and personalize something to Tony is just so incredible. For you, what do you want people to take away from your father's legacy? If they are just, for a kid that has, just discovered baseball and is finding this and starting to look up the past, what do you think would be most important for them to take away about your father's legacy?
You play for the love of the game, and I think that sounds cliche because we hear that phrase often, but that is what you're seeing in those some of those personalized inscriptions. Is that my dad didn't play for the fame, he didn't play for the money. He played because he loved it, and he played because he wanted his peers to respect him. And so again, when you get those type of guys who take the time out to inscribe something personally to you, um, that that makes you feel like you've achieved what you set out to do. And so, that's just one of the many things I want people to remember about my father.
It's true. And for collectors and fans, what do you want them to think? Anybody that has a chance to own or that wins any of these items, what are you most excited to see about these kind of getting a new life? I mean, you guys have so many items. He has more milestones than fit, 10 storage lockers, which
Yeah.
is, why we're condensing a lot of these things. But for the people that are lucky enough to win and take these home, what do you hope happens to these items?
I hope you take care of them. I hope you get the chance to enjoy them the way that I did as a young kid, and even as a young teenager, young man coming back to see my mom and dad, seeing that stuff up there. It's certainly a part of his legacy, and I just hope whoever gets to have one of these items enjoys it as much as I did.
Amazing. A couple things I want to show. I want to pull a couple of these items out real quick and just get quick reactions from you on them. So first up, I love these, especially being a sneakerhead. 3000th hit,
Yes, yeah,
inscribed cleats,
yeah.
Montreal, August 6th, 1999. And this was actually one of my favorite Nike models, too. These Zoom Air cleats where every player wore in the 90s that were super sick in the patent leather. What is this? What does this remind you of when you
It
see this?
reminds me of the '90s. I mean, as much as suede may be what we like now, patent leather meant that you were a dude. Like not everybody got patent leather.
Yeah.
That was like one of for the select few.
Yep. Do you remember this 3000th hit? Do you
I
remember
do.
that day?
I wasn't there. Ironically, I had my dad and I had trained for this area code game, which is a big showcase tournament for high school baseball players. So we had trained up to that, and the plan was for him to get it in St. Louis because I had been on the trip up to St. Louis. Mark McGuire was shooting for his fifth 500th homer at the time. So I mean,
Wow.
it would have been spectacular for both of them to get those milestones on the same day. However, my dad ended up a hit short. I had to go back to Long Beach for the area code, and he did it the following day. So I missed out on it, but I was watching on TV.
So many milestones. I mean, like, yeah, that's the problem. Just 3000 hate. There's a million other milestones in his career that's there, which is insane. Let's pull this out. This is really interesting. We have one for San Diego, but I decided to pull out the Long Beach key to the city, right? Which is so cool and given from the mayor.
Yeah,
When you think of this, how does this make you feel, seeing that your dad was recognized not only obviously in San Diego, but it's always great going back to your hometown and getting recognized.
it goes back to the whole being grounded part. I think that's where my mom and dad grew up. They met each other. That's where my sister and I spent a bunch of summers growing up, and it has always been kind of the thing that I think has kept my mom and dad grounded, and I think therefore has kept the rest of our family grounded.
All right, I'm going to see. I might be able to stump you with this one. Um, at first glance, when you see this, looks like a Tony Gwynn jersey, right? Then you see the font, you're like, oh, it's a little early. We see 1977 Wilson. It looks like a game used jersey, size 50. But your dad wasn't playing for the Padres in 1977. Do you have any idea? I'll tell you who, if not. But do you have any idea of whose jersey this is?
I mean, is it Winfield?
Good question. So it's funny when you look at the rookie card of your father. He's not wearing number 19. That tops
No,
card, everybody knows he's wearing, I think, 53 or
56.
something.
Yeah, something along
56,
those
yeah.
lines. Yeah,
Some weird high number that he didn't wear. So he got good enough that he could get a lower number. It's kind of like, something in baseball. You see a lot of rookies wearing these high numbers and then they actually make it. It's in spring training, which
yep.
is where they take a lot of baseball cards. They make it. Why do you Weedleman? Padres
Well,
coach, all
that's
those things played. He then gave this, he said it was okay and gave this number to your father. And somehow this ended up in his collection. It looks like it was a game used or, definitely game issued jersey. You see all the tags, Wilson 50. Obviously, we weren't there, but we found this and we're like, wait, actually one of our
that
collectors pointed
that
it out.
that's
And we looked
interesting.
up,
I remember
crazy.
Whitey. Yeah, I remember
Do
the
you?
manager absolutely, but I didn't had no idea that that was his jersey though.
Yeah, because we looked at it and then somebody pointed out, like, hey, that's not like a Gwynn. He wasn't. And we're like, yeah, the math doesn't work and add up. So, again, the stories behind the stories are so interesting. But he told your dad something like, yeah, you better make it proud and do all right. So I think he did all
I
right and
think
made
he held
Whitey
his end of the
proud.
bargain up. Yeah.
Whitey was really proud with that. I mean, so many incredible things. We're so excited for this. Last question I have for you is, again, this auction features so many pieces of his career. You have the Silver Slugger from, I mean, he has 7 of these, right? This one is from 1997, which highest
Wow.
batting average in a full season. The strike short 94 season, he obviously hit higher, but in shorter games. How did he approach achievements and milestones? He obviously, kept an incredible amount of things, and a lot of that obviously was your mother and stuff. But was he somebody that liked to celebrate these moments or to keep looking forward? Like, how did he approach success?
I don't know that he did. I think if you've ever seen the call from the Hall of Fame to let him know he had gotten into the Hall of Fame, that is him finally, I think, looking back on his achievements. Each and every one of those batting titles, silver sluggers, he just kept it moving. Like he'd win it, and it wouldn't even be a conversation. It would, he'd take his break when the season ended, and then come November, he was back to work again. The only thing I think he may have celebrated a little bit, or at least took time to be proud of, was those were the 5 Gold Gloves, because he didn't come into the game as a good defensive player at all, and so
Yeah.
he had to kind of work to get to that level. And the fact that he was able to pull in 5, I think he would tell you that those were his highest achievements.
They look so incredible. And it's funny too, you talk to a lot of people that are known as great hitters. I mean, baseball, you're really more documented outside of pitchers, right, by what you do on offense. But when you talk to a Ken Griffey Jr., to any of these people, they are much more proud of what they do defensively. And especially, you're right, your father came in, people were signing him for his bat. So for the fact
Right.
that he got to do those, and the fact these awards look so cool, I'm so excited because for those of you watching before this auction ends, we actually have his 1987 Gold Glove on display in New York City at Bleecker Trading, one of the premier card shops there. So people have been going up and actually being able to witness it. If you guys are in New York, you guys can see it. These awards just look so cool, right? They're just so much history. And the Gold Glove is actually, I thought it was like a metal plate. It's actually a glove. It's
Yeah,
just
it's stitched in
gold,
there.
right? Like
Yeah.
you could
Yep.
probably play with it. We're not going to try that, but like it's insane when you look at this stuff. So, anyways, Tony Jr., we thank you so much for your time, and it's been such an honor working with you and your family, and we really are trying to do our best to keep this legacy continuing, and so excited to give fans the opportunity to now, help pass and to carry on these stories to an entire new generation.
Yeah, no, no, Ski. I appreciate you having me on, man, and I hope whoever, as I said, gets a chance to have one of these items and get a chance to enjoy it. They truly are special.
So one really interesting thing about all of this is we built the Realist with the highest security, right? We use witness-based authentication the same way MLB authentication uses, which in our expertise is the really only form that matters. It's so interesting and it's kind of eerie in terms of how we started this company. When we found out why MLB's authentication program was born, one of the early examples, and I don't even know if you know this, is your father went up to the San Diego Padres team shop one
Oh,
day and they were
do it.
selling all these signed balls. And he said, whose autograph is that? And he said, yours. He said, that's not my autograph. And, as part of this wider report from Operation Bullpen, where the FBI estimates 50 to 90% of items are fake, they found $100 million in counterfeit goods. It was actually your father who helped institute this standard that we are using today, which is just like eerie when you think how the world comes together. What's your thoughts? And have you seen, I'm sure you've seen, what do you think when you come across all of this memorabilia that you see a signature, you're like, oh, it's probably not his. It's not there. I'm sure it's happened to you, right?
Oh, for sure. I think it's one of the things that I think comes along with being so maniacal when it comes to hitting and your mechanics, is you're meticulous about your handwriting. My dad had like extremely neat handwriting, and
Yeah.
he used to bag on me all the time about my handwriting. But so when he's very astute. So we walked by, as you said, a team store. He's gonna look, and whether it was a bat that wasn't supposed to be in there or a baseball that had a signature that wasn't his, that was claiming to be his, he really took those type of things very, very seriously. So I'm not surprised at all. I had heard the story, and I'm not surprised at all that he's the reason why the authentication thing is what it is.
So it's really why we're here, which is why I said it couldn't be perfect. And again, we usually do use witness-based authentication for our gold stickers. We obviously can't do that and go back in time, but for things that we get, again, all of these are from the source. We apply this silver sticker to it so people can see. So that is the difference with our authentication. We don't take any third-party items, and it's the only way that we can protect fans in a world
Yeah.
that's full of fraud.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. It's the best way to go about it for sure.
You're the man. Predictions for the Padres next season?
I predict it will be an equally successful season, perhaps deeper.
Ooh, I like it. Very, very great answer. I mean, you've really got your broadcast and your political skills as a journalist up to par, Tony Jr. I am impressed, man. Not many can do it. I'll come hang with you soon. Appreciate you taking the time out, and thank you guys again.
No problem, Ski. Take care, brother.